Fog hung over San Francisco like a jealous lover, cloaking the city in a cool gray haze that muted the neon glow of the financial district. Eric Tanner, 29, stood by the large window of his 12th floor Soma loft, sipping an iced coffee that cost more than most people's lunches. The city spread out below, a mosaic of ambition and bustle that looked just like him. His MacBook lay open on the smooth quartz countertop, the screen displaying a dashboard of cryptocurrency trades, green numbers flying up like vines on a trellis. Ethereum was up 7% today, Solana was holding steady, and his latest DeFi yield farming project was making heart-pounding profits. Eric wasn't born rich. He grew up in a modest suburb of Sacramento, where his father fixed cars and his mother taught third graders. But he always had a knack for recognizing patterns, for seeing the undercurrents beneath the surface. At 19, he stumbled upon Bitcoin when it was a geek's dream, mining the coins on an old computer in his dorm room at Berkeley. By 25, he'd turned $10,000 in student loans into a $2 million portfolio. Now at 29, he was approaching 8 figures, a crypto gem who'd bet on decentralized finance and won. His latest project, a DeFi protocol called Yield Pulse, was the talk of blockchain forums from here to Singapore. But money, Eric was beginning to understand, wasn't everything. It bought a loft, a Tesla, custom suits, but it didn't fill the quiet moments. It didn't quell the nagging feeling that he was still just a kid from Sacramento, playing dress-up in a world that could swallow him. His phone buzzed on the counter, startling him out of his thoughts. A text from Mia, his on-again, off-again girlfriend. Dinner tonight? Or are you married to your laptop again? Eric smirked as he typed his reply. The laptop is jealous, but I can fit you into the schedule. Quince at 7. Mia responded, instantly awesome. Are you paying, crypto boy? As always, he wrote back, though the truth was more complicated. Mia was a graphic designer, witty and creative, with an infectious laugh that could light up a room. But she didn't understand cryptocurrency, didn't understand why Eric spent 18 hours a day obsessing over smart contracts and gas fees. She'd once called his work gambling with extra steps, and he didn't exactly disagree. He put down his phone and walked back to the window. The fog was clearing, revealing the jagged skyline of downtown. Yield Pulse was his baby, a platform that allowed users to stake crypto assets in liquidity pools and earn returns that banks could only dream of. It was decentralized, secure, and, most important, profitable. Last week, a Palo Alto venture capital firm offered him $20 million for a 10% stake. He turned it down because Yield Pulse wasn't just a business. It was a revolution, or so he told himself. The intercom buzzed, and Eric frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. He crossed the loft, his sneakers making no noise on the polished concrete floor, and pressed the button. Yes. Eric, it's Raj. Are you going to let me in already, or what? Eric laughed as he opened the door. Raj Patel was his best friend and unofficial advisor, a former Google engineer who had dropped everything to join Eric's crypto crusade. Raj had a knack for cutting through his pomposity, which was both a blessing and a curse. A minute later, Raj walked in, radiating energy, wearing a t-shirt with the inscription HODL to the moon. He had a laptop bag slung over his shoulder and a blue bottle paper cup in his hand. Dude, he said, plopping down on the leather couch, you look like you haven't slept since the last bull market. Sleep is overrated, Eric replied, grabbing his coffee and joining him. What's new? Got the audit report? Raj nodded, pulling out his laptop. Yeah, but you're not going to like it. Smart contracts are fine, mostly. Found a reentrancy bug in the staking function. Nothing fatal, but someone smart could have siphoned off a few grand if they'd noticed. Eric's stomach clenched. Damn. Can we fix this? Already fixed it. I fixed it last night. But we need to do a full audit before we launch the next liquidity pool. Can't rush this, dude. One bad exploit and we're screwed. Eric ran a hand through his hair, which, despite his best efforts to ignore it, was starting to thin at the temples. I know, but the market is hot right now. If we don't scale quickly, someone else will beat us to it. Raj leaned back, looking at him. You sound like every other startup guy in this town. Thought you were different. I'm different, Eric responded too quickly. It's not just about money. It's about building something real that changes the way people make money. Raj snorted. Save that for the TED Talk. You're burning out, Eric. And for what? Another zero on the scoreboard? Eric didn't answer. There was no need. Raj knew him too well, knew the hunger that drove him, the need to prove he was more than just a lucky guy who caught the crypto wave at the right moment. But lately, even Eric wasn't sure what he was after. The money was nice, sure, but it wasn't enough anymore. He wanted a legacy. He wanted to matter. Okay, Raj said, breaking the silence. Let's talk about strategy. The Yield Pulse launch party is next week. Ready to pitch to the big shots? Binance is sending someone, and I heard Coinbase might show up too. Eric felt his pulse quicken. Coinbase? Seriously? Yeah, and they're not just coming. Rumor has it that they're looking for a DeFi protocol like ours to integrate with. If we do it right, we could be on their platform by Q3. Eric leaned forward, ideas already swirling in his head. Okay, so we need to polish up the presentation. Show off the staking pool, show the annual percentage yield, maybe add a little hype about our governance token. Keep it down, cowboy. Raj raised his hand. You can't just throw numbers at them. These guys get 100 pitches a day. You have to tell a story. Make them believe in Yield Pulse the way you do. Eric frowned. What? Some saccharine nonsense about financial freedom. Exactly. But make it real. Tell me why you started it. Not about the money, the real reason. Eric hesitated. The truth was, he'd started Yield Pulse because he saw an opportunity, a gap in the market that no one was filling. But there was something else too, right? A kid from Sacramento who'd seen his parents struggling to make ends meet and knew there had to be a better way. Cryptocurrency wasn't just a way to get rich quick. It was a way to rewrite the rules, to give people like his mom and dad a chance at something bigger. I'll think about it, he finally said. But you're helping with the presentation. Raj grinned. Deal. Now tell me, is there any food in this fancy loft, or are we ordering delivery again? That evening, Eric met Mia at Quince, a Michelin-starred restaurant in Jackson Square, where the waiters moved as if they were rehearsing a ballet. Mia was already there when he arrived, her dark hair pulled back into a loose bun, her eyes skeptical as she studied the menu. This place is absurd, she said as he sat down across from her. Have you seen the price of truffle pasta? I could buy a new tablet for that. Eric chuckled, loosening his tie. It's worth it. Trust me. Plus, I'm paying, remember. Yeah, Mr. Crypto Millionaire. She smiled, but there was a wry edge to her smile. So, how's the empire doing? Still taking over the world one blockchain at a time? Something like that. He leaned back, trying to gauge her mood. Mia had a way of cutting through his bravado, and that was one of the reasons he liked her. But it also made him nervous, like she could see the cracks in his confidence that he tried so hard to hide. The waiter came over, and they ordered truffle pasta for her, lamb for him, and a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet that cost more than his first car. As the waiter poured the wine, Mia leaned forward, squinting. So what's the matter, Eric? You've been acting strange lately. Absent-minded, even more than usual. He took a sip of wine, stalling. Just work. Launch next week, and there's a lot at stake. Always work, she said, but without malice. But there's something else. It's like you're half absent when we're together. What's going on? Eric sighed, setting his glass down. He wanted to brush it off, to say it was just stress, but Mia deserved better. I don't know, he admitted. I think a lot about what's next, you know. I have the money, the company, but sometimes it feels like I'm on a treadmill, like I'm not getting anywhere. Mia raised an eyebrow. That's deep for a guy who was obsessed with gas fees last week. He laughed despite himself. Fair enough. But seriously, I keep thinking, is this it? Is this what I'm supposed to do with my life? Build apps, make tons of money, repeat? She looked at him, her expression softening. You're allowed to want more, Eric. Money is great, but it's not a person. What do you really care about, besides yield pulse and your fancy loft? He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. Honestly, he wasn't sure. He cared about his parents, about proving himself, about not destroying what he'd built. But beyond, it was a blank, a question he'd avoided for months. Before he could respond, the food arrived, and the conversation turned to lighter topics: her latest design project, a mural for a startup in Mission Bay, his disastrous attempt at making risotto last week. But her question remained, a quiet challenge he couldn't shake. The night of the Yield Pulse launch party came like a storm, with flashing lights and pulsating bass in a converted warehouse in Dogpatch. The space was filled with crypto bros, venture capitalists, and tech journalists sipping craft cocktails and pretending to understand the intricacies of decentralized finance. Eric stood at the front of the stage, microphone in one hand and a glass of whiskey in the other, his heart pounding harder than it had during his first crypto trade. Raj was there, as always, whispering last-minute remarks. Don't rush the introduction, and don't mention the reentrancy bug. No one needs to know we almost screwed up. Got it, Eric said, scanning the crowd. He spotted Mia at the bar, wearing an elegant black dress that took his breath away. She gave him a small wave, and he felt a surge of gratitude. She didn't have to be there, but she was. The music faded, and Eric walked out onto the stage. The spotlight fell on him, and for a moment he felt like an imposter, a kid from Sacramento pretending to be a tech mogul. But then he spoke, and the words flowed easily, fueled by months of sleepless nights and unrivaled faith. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice firm, welcome to the future of finance. Yield Pulse is not just a platform, it's a movement. It's about giving power back to the people, allowing you to control your money without banks or middlemen. 5 years ago, I was a student mining Bitcoin in my dorm room. Today, I stand here because I believe in a world where anyone, everywhere, can build wealth on their own terms. The crowd murmured, and several nodded. He continued, explaining the platform: how users could stake assets, earn revenue, vote on governance proposals. He kept it simple, human, avoiding the jargon that makes most crypto pitches sound like alien transmissions. By the end of his talk, the room was buzzing, and he could see the Binance representative taking notes. As he walked off stage, Raj slapped him on the back. You did it, man. You'll be getting offers from venture capitalists by midnight. Eric smiled, but his eyes were on Mia as she made her way through the crowd. How do you like it? He asked as she approached. She tilted her head, smiling playfully. Not bad, crypto boy. You almost made me believe it all. Almost, he teased. Hey, I'm here, aren't I? She linked her arm through his, pulling him toward the bar. Come on, buy me a drink. You owe me for sitting through all that blockchain talk. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, pitches, and late-night coding sessions. Coinbase hadn't just come calling, they were proposing a partnership that could take Yield Pulse to the next level. Eric and Raj worked around the clock, ironing out details, auditing code, and dodging regulators. The platform's user base grew, and so did Eric's bank account. By any measure, he'd succeeded. He'd become a name in the industry, the kid from Sacramento who'd beaten the odds. But the quiet moments still haunted him. Late at night, when the city was asleep and his laptop was off, he would lie awake, wondering what it was all for. Mia's question echoed in his head. What do you really care about? One evening, as they walked along the Embarcadero, the Bay Bridge glittering in the distance, he finally answered. I want to build something that lasts, he said quietly. Not just money, but something that helps people like my parents. People who never had a chance in this system. That's why I started all this. Mia stopped, turning to face him. Then do it, she said simply. You have the money, the platform, the brains. Use them to change the world, not just line your pockets. It wasn't a revelation, not exactly. But it was a spark, a reminder of why he'd set out on this path in the first place. The next day, he called Raj and pitched a new idea, an initiative called Yield Pulse to bring education and access to DeFi to underserved communities, starting in his old neighborhood of Sacramento. Raj, predictably, called him sentimental, but agreed to help. Looking out over the city he had conquered, Eric felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, he wasn't just chasing numbers, he was chasing meaning. And that, he realized, was worth more than all the cryptocurrencies in the world. Las Vegas sparkled like a mirage in the desert neon lights, loud crowds, and the scent of ambition permeating the air. Eric Tanner adjusted the collar of his shirt as he stood outside the massive convention center where the annual Block Vegas crypto conference was taking place. It was his first time speaking at a major event. Yield Pulse, his DeFi protocol, had earned a slot to present in front of thousands of investors, developers, and blockchain enthusiasts. Tanner was nervous not so much about the talk itself, but because this was his chance to cement his success. At 29, he was used to high stakes, but today his nerves were more jangling than usual. Inside, the room was buzzing like a beehive. Startup booths with holographic logos and free merch sat next to coffee shops where tattooed baristas served espresso for crypto. Eric made his way through the crowd, clutching a flash drive with the pitch deck in his hand. His gaze kept catching on faces, bearded techies in Ethereum t-shirts, venture capitalists in expensive suits, bloggers with cameras capturing every detail for their followers. He felt at once at home and out of place. Eric, hey, Tanner. The voice of Raj, his friend and partner, cut through the noise. Raj pushed his way toward him, holding two plastic cups filled with something suspiciously bright. Sponsor's cocktail. Don't ask what it is, just drink it. You need to relax before you pitch. Eric took the glass but didn't drink. I'm fine. It's just a lot of stuff. Binance is here, Coinbase is here. If I screw this up, it's going to be epic. You won't screw up, Raj clapped him on the shoulder. You're Eric Tanner, the guy who turned student loans into millions. Just come out and tell your story. And for God's sake, smile. You look like you're walking to your execution. Eric chuckled, but his gaze had already slid to the side to the woman standing at the booth demonstrating the NFT platform. She stood out like a rare token in a sea of mediocre drops. Tall, with dark hair pulled back into a messy but stylish bun, wearing a black dress that looked both professional and damn glamorous. She was explaining something to a group of guys who were listening to her with such attention, as if she were revealing the secret to eternal profits. Eric couldn't look away. Hey, are you listening? Raj followed his gaze and smirked. Oh, got it. Well, good luck, Romeo. Just remember to give your speech in an hour. Eric waved him off, but his feet were already carrying him toward the stand. He didn't know what he was going to say, but something about this woman, her confident posture, the way she gestured as she explained something about smart contracts pulled him in like a magnet. And that's why Ethereum gas fees aren't a bug, they're a feature, if you understand how to optimize transactions. Her voice was low, slightly husky, as if she was used to speaking long and convincingly. The guys around her nodded, one even wrote something down on his phone. She noticed Eric standing a little to the side, and her eyes dark, with a spark of curiosity met him. And you? Any opinions on gas? Eric froze, but quickly pulled himself together. Well, if we're talking about Ethereum, I'd say it's more of a tax on dreams. If you want decentralization, pay for it. She laughed, and it was like a sip of whiskey, warm and scalding. That's a good answer, but I'd wager that Solana does the dreaming for less. Solana? Seriously? Eric raised an eyebrow, stepping closer. Sure, it's fast, but centralizing their nodes is like building a castle on sand. Wow, the guy knows his stuff. She crossed her arms, but the smile never left her face. I'm Alexa, by the way. Alexa Rain. Who are you, a Solana critic? Eric Tanner, he said, holding out his hand, and hers was firm, confident. I'm here with Yield Pulse. The presentation is in an hour. If you want to hear me, try not to screw up in front of half the crypto world. Yield pulse? I've heard of you. DeFi with a focus on yield farming, right? Not bad for a startup. She tilted her head, studying him. But you don't look like your typical crypto bro. Where's your Bitcoin shirt? Eric laughed. I left it at home, next to my 2013 miner. And you're clearly not just a bystander at this conference. I'm an analyst at a crypto fund, and a bit of a smart contract consultant. I like to dig into code and find where developers are trying to cheat. She winked, and Eric felt his pulse quicken. So, Eric Tanner, tell me about Yield Pulse. What makes your protocol so special? He started to explain about liquidity pools, about governance tokens, about how they optimized yield, but his thoughts kept wandering. Alexa listened attentively, asking questions that showed she really knew. How do you solve the front-running problem? And what's your approach to security auditing? This wasn't just chatter. She dug deep, and Eric liked it. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was talking to someone who understood his world. Okay, you've got me intrigued, he said, when she'd finished blasting his scalability arguments. But I have to go prepare for my pitch. Maybe we can continue over coffee after my presentation. Alexa narrowed her eyes, but her smile was warm. Only if your pitch is as convincing as you're trying to be right now. Good luck, Eric Tanner. The pitch went better than he expected. Eric walked out on stage under bright lights, in front of a crowd of hundreds, and pitched the Yield Pulse story not just about interest and tokens, but about how he wanted to change the game, to give people control over their finances. He spotted Alexa in the crowd, near the front, her eyes on him, and that gave him confidence. When he finished, the crowd applauded, and Raj, standing near the stage, gave him a thumbs up. After the show, Eric found her at the bar, sipping something with lime. Did you pass the test? He asked, trying to hide his nervousness. Not bad, she replied, setting her glass down. You know how to hold a room, but I'm still not sure about your governance model. Too much power in the hands of token holders, don't you think? Oh, you just want to argue, Eric smirked, ordering himself a whiskey. Okay, let's sort this out over coffee. Or dinner, if you don't mind me talking about blockchain over dessert. Alexa laughed. You're brave. Okay, dinner, but only if you promise not to mention the word decentralization more than 3 times. Agreed, but I reserve the right to say blockchain as much as I want. Dinner was at the rooftop restaurant of the Cosmopolitan Hotel, overlooking the shimmering Vegas skyline. They talked about crypto, of course, but the conversation quickly veered off to talk about how Alexa grew up in Chicago, went to MIT, and then left traditional finance for crypto because she was tired of boring bankers. Eric talked about Sacramento, about his parents who still didn't understand what he was doing, about how he almost quit after the 2018 crash. You know, you don't look like your typical crypto hero, she said, cutting into a piece of steak. Most guys in this industry either show off their Lambos or preach like they're Satoshi Nakamoto. Who am I? He asked, genuinely curious. You're genuine, a little naive maybe, but you have fire, and you're not afraid to look vulnerable. That's rare. Eric felt a warmth in his chest, not from the whiskey. And you're clearly more than just an analyst. What drives you? She mulled over the wine. I want technology to work for people, not corporations. Blockchain is a chance to rebuild the system. But I've seen too many projects that promise revolution and are just cashing in on the hype. That's why I dig so deep. I want to find something real. And Yield Pulse is real? He asked, almost afraid of the answer. I don't know yet, she smiled, but her gaze was serious. But I want to figure it out. The next few days of the conference were a whirlwind of meetings, panels, and parties, but Eric and Alexa found time to meet for coffee in the morning, for cocktails in the evening, even sneaking out of a Web3 panel to stroll the strip and laugh at the absurdity of Vegas. Their connection was instant, like a spark, but not superficial. They argued about the future of crypto, joked about NFTs with monkeys, shared stories of their failures and triumphs. Eric felt like he could be himself around her, not a crypto mogul, not a startup founder, just Eric. On the last night of the conference, they found themselves on the hotel terrace, looking out at the city lights. "So what now?" she asked, leaning against the railing. "Are you going back to San Francisco, continuing to build your empire?" "Looks like it," he replied, standing closer than necessary. "And you, back to New York, exposing bad smart contracts?" "Maybe," she turned to him, her face illuminated by the soft light. "But I think I might stop in San Francisco, if there's anyone there worth it." Eric smiled, feeling his heart pound. "I think I know a guy." She laughed, and in that moment, he realized this wasn't just a passing fancy. Alexa wasn't just a woman who knew crypto. She was someone who made him want to be better, not just in business, but in life. "Then it's a deal," she said, holding out her hand as if making a deal. But when he shook it, she pulled him close and kissed him, and Vegas, with its noise and lights, disappeared, leaving just the two of them. San Francisco sparkled in the September sun, bathing the bay in a golden glow that reflected off the glass skyscrapers. Eric Tanner stood on the balcony of his Soma loft, looking out over the city that had become his home, his battleground, and now the place where he was about to begin a new chapter. In 3 days, he would marry Alexa Rain, the woman who had burst into his life like a meteor at a crypto conference in Las Vegas just 6 weeks earlier. Their romance had been as fast as a bull market, bright, exciting, and a little scary in its speed. But Eric was certain Alexa was the one. He met her in a whirlwind of neon lights and smart contract talk, and they've been inseparable ever since. She moved from New York to San Francisco, renting an apartment in North Beach to be closer to him. Their days were filled with long conversations about blockchain, dreams of the future of DeFi, and moments of just laughing while walking down the Embarcadero or sitting over coffee at a cafe in the ferry building. Alexa wasn't just the woman who understood his world, she was his partner, his equal, the one who made him feel like anything was possible. But his thoughts today were not only on the upcoming wedding. Alexa had insisted on a prenuptial agreement, and the suggestion, while logical, left him slightly uneasy. "It's just common sense, Eric," she had said over dinner last week, her dark eyes looking at him with familiar confidence. "We both know how quickly things can change in this business. Let's not confuse love and money." "You're right," he replied, swallowing his doubts along with a sip of Pinot Noir. "But it's not very romantic, is it?" She laughed, her laugh as warm as whiskey, as always. "Romance is for the honeymoon. A prenuptial agreement is a smart contract for life. You like smart contracts, right?" He smiled, unable to argue with her logic. Alexa was right. In a world where startups could rise and fall overnight and crypto exchanges could disappear with millions of dollars, caution was a good thing. Still, as he signed the papers her lawyer sent the next day, Eric felt a twinge of doubt. The document was dense, full of legal jargon, but the gist of it was that his assets, including his stake in YieldPulse, would remain his, and her assets, which she had only spoken about in general terms, would remain hers. "Just a formality," she assured him, kissing his cheek. And he believed it, because he wanted to believe it. The wedding was small by San Francisco standards, but still lavish. They chose a winery in Napa Valley, surrounded by rolling hills and vineyards, where the air smelled of earth and ripe grapes. The guests were few Raj, Eric's best friend and partner, a few crypto industry colleagues, Eric's parents, who flew in from Sacramento, and a couple of Alexa's friends from New York. Mia, Eric's ex-girlfriend, was not invited, although he sent her a quick text to let her know about the wedding. She responded with a dry, "Congratulations," and that was the end of their communication. Alexa looked stunning in a simple white dress that showed off her petite figure. Her dark hair was loose, falling in soft waves over her shoulders, and the smile she gave him as she walked down the aisle made him forget everything: the pact, the doubts, the world beyond this moment. When they exchanged vows, her words were simple but sincere. "Eric, you make me believe that the future can be better. I want to build it with you." His vowel was longer, a little choppy, but full of emotion. Alexa, you are like a code I can't crack, but want to study for the rest of my life. You make me a better person, and I promise to be there for you, come what may, bull market or bear market. The guests laughed, Raj the loudest, and the ceremony ended with a kiss that drew applause. At the reception, they danced to live music, drank 2018 Cabernet, and laughed at Raj's toast, which managed to mention blockchain 3 times in a minute. You sure you're ready for this, man? Raj asked later as they stood at the bar, watching Alexa dance with one of her friends. She's cool, but, I don't know, she's always like one step ahead. Eric frowned, taking a sip of his whiskey. What do you mean? Raj shrugged, his eyes more serious than usual. She's smart, maybe too smart. Just watch yourself, okay? You can be so naive sometimes, I just want to shake you. Relax, Raj, Eric slapped him on the back. This is a wedding, not due diligence. She's my wife, not my competitor. Raj only nodded, but his eyes remained wary. They honeymooned in Bali, in a villa overlooking the ocean, where the days blended into a kaleidoscope of sun, salty waves, and long nights filled with conversation and laughter. Alexa was the perfect companion, witty, passionate, always up for an adventure, whether diving the coral reefs or debating whether Ethereum would survive the transition to proof of stake. But even then, Eric sometimes found himself wondering how much he knew about her. She rarely talked about her past, her crypto fund, or what she had been doing before their paths crossed. When he asked, she laughed it off or changed the subject, and he didn't press the issue. Love, he told himself, didn't require a full audit. Back in San Francisco, they settled into Eric's loft, which now seemed livelier with her finance books lining the shelves and her habit of leaving coffee mugs on every table. Yield Pulse was growing at breakneck speed. A partnership with Coinbase was in the works, and Eric spent his days negotiating and his nights coding. Alexa seemed in her element, advising him on scaling and helping him analyze competitors. She even pitched an idea for a new liquidity pool that could attract institutional investors. You're a genius, he told her one night as they sat on the couch, surrounded by laptops and empty Thai takeout boxes. Seriously, I couldn't have done it without you. She smiled, but there was something in her eyes he couldn't decipher. You could do it, Eric. You always do. I'm just speeding things up. He laughed, pulling her close. You're my personal blockchain, transparent, efficient, and damn beautiful. Careful, Tanner, she nudged him in the ribs. One more blockchain comparison, and I'll start charging for consulting. But within a couple of weeks of her return, something began to change. Alexa began leaving more often on foundation business, she said, and her answers about where she'd been or who she'd met became increasingly evasive. One evening, Eric found her at her laptop, engrossed in some spreadsheets, which she quickly rolled up when he walked in. What was that? He asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Nothing special, she replied, closing her laptop. Just checking a briefcase for a client. Boring stuff. He nodded, but there was a strange feeling in his chest. Later, when she was asleep, he'd opened her laptop, not out of suspicion but curiosity. The screen was locked, and he felt a pang of guilt. What was he looking for anyway? Proof that she wasn't who she said she was. He'd pushed the thought away, but it kept nagging at him. The next day, he called Raj. Look, this is stupid, but have you ever checked Alexa? Like, her background? Raj was silent for a second. Are you serious? You married her, and now you want to do due diligence? I don't. It's just, she's so closed off sometimes, and that prenup, I just want to be sure. Raj sighed. Okay, I can dig around. But dude, if you don't trust her, that's a problem. Not the contract, but you. Eric didn't answer. He knew Raj was right, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Alexa was perfect, too perfect, and in a world where he'd learned to see hidden patterns, that was starting to seem suspicious. A week later, Raj came to him with a flash drive and a grim expression. You were right to ask me to check it, he said, sitting down at the table. I found something. I'm not sure you'll like it. Eric felt the blood drain from his face. What exactly? Raj plugged the flash drive into his laptop and opened the file folder. Alexa Rain isn't quite what she seems. Her crypto fund is real, but it's, well, not entirely clean. There are transaction trails that lead to questionable wallets, and her name popped up in a couple of old forums where people were discussing token manipulation. Eric stared at the screen, which was filled with screenshots of transactions and forum posts. His mind refused to accept it. This isn't proof. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe, Raj agreed, but his tone was hard. But the prenup, I showed it to a lawyer I know. He said it was designed to protect her assets and yours. Let's just say if Yield Pulse goes under, she could lay claim to some of your share, regardless of the clauses. Eric felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He wanted to argue, wanted to say that Raj was wrong, that Alexa loved him. But the memories, her evasiveness, her locked laptop, her insistence on the contract were forming a picture he couldn't ignore. What should I do? He asked, his voice barely audible. Raj looked at him sympathetically. Talk to her, but be prepared for the fact that you won't like the answers. That night, when Alexa got home, Eric was waiting for her in the living room. The lights were dim, and there was a flash drive on the table. She paused, her gaze sliding from him to the flash drive. Eric, what's going on? Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of wariness in it. I want to know the truth, he said, trying to keep his voice even. About your fund, about your transactions, about why you were so insistent on this contract. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't look away. You were digging into my past, seriously? I wasn't digging. Alexa, I trust you, but I need to know, who are you really? She was silent for a long time, too long. Then she sighed and sat down across from him. Okay, Eric, you want the truth? I'm not a saint. My foundation, we played by tough rules. Sometimes that meant deals not everyone would like. But I never lied to you about how I felt. And the contract, his voice wavered. Was that just a game too? The contract was for protection, mine and yours. This world is cruel, Eric. You know that. I didn't want our feelings to be held hostage to business. He looked at her, trying to find the lie in her words, but he saw only her, the woman he loved, and yet the doubt remained. I need time, he said finally, to think it over. She nodded, her face unreadable. Okay, but don't forget, Eric, love is not a smart contract. It can't be verified on the blockchain. She stood up and went into the bedroom, leaving him alone with the flash drive and questions he wasn't ready to answer. San Francisco awoke to the soft light of a fall morning, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the fog settling on the Golden Gate Bridge. Eric Tanner sat at the kitchen island in his loft, sipping espresso as his MacBook loaded the latest data from Yield Pulse. The platform was thriving, with users flocking to liquidity pools, the governance token rising in value, and the Coinbase deal nearly finalized. But despite the success, there was a strange feeling in Eric's chest, not anxiety, but something close to it. Alexa, his wife of just 3 months, was asleep in their bedroom, her dark hair spread out across the pillow. She was a part of his life, his world, but after their conversation about the prenup and her past, something had changed between them. He couldn't quite describe it, but it felt like she was always one step ahead, and he was trying to catch up. The bedroom door creaked, and Alexa emerged, tying the belt of her silk robe. "Good morning, Crypto King," she said with a smile, but her gaze slid to his laptop. "Working at 7 in the morning again? Did you even get any sleep?" "About 5 hours," Eric shrugged, closing the analytics tab. "Coinbase sent a new draft of the agreement. I'll have to check it before sending it to the lawyers." She nodded, pouring herself a cup of coffee from his expensive coffee machine. "Have you thought about hiring another advisor? Someone with regulatory experience? The SEC is getting increasingly nervous about DeFi." Eric frowned, sipping his coffee. We already have a legal team. They can handle it. I know, but they're, let's say, traditional. Alexa sat down across from him, her tone light, but her eyes serious. I can recommend someone, a guy I know, David Klein. He's worked with a few crypto funds, knows how to talk to regulators. It could save us a lot of headaches. Us, Eric raised an eyebrow, but smiled to soften the question. Are you officially on Team Yield Pulse yet? She laughed, tossing her hair back. I'm your wife, Eric. Your wins are my wins. Plus, I know the industry. Why not help? Her words sounded sincere, and Eric nodded. Okay, send me his contact information. I'll talk to Raj, see what he thinks. Alexa smiled, but there was something in her gaze's satisfaction, calculation, that made his inner voice whisper, be careful. A week later, David Klein was sitting in the Yield Pulse office, a small space downtown that Eric had rented for the team. David was a tall, balding man in his 40s, with a sharp gaze and a way of speaking that always seemed to know more than you did. He carried a briefcase full of ideas about how to protect Yield Pulse from regulatory risk, and a resume that impressed even Raj. This guy knows his stuff, Raj said after the meeting as he and Eric drank beers at a bar across the street from the office. But he's fucking expensive, and I'm not sure we need another consultant. We've got it covered. Alexa thinks we need it, Eric replied, twirling the bottle in his hands. She says the SEC could be a problem, especially if we integrate with Coinbase. Raj narrowed his eyes. Alexa's been saying a lot of things lately, haven't you thought? First that contract, now this guy. What's next? Is she going to suggest her accountant? Eric tensed. Are you starting again? She's my wife, Raj. She just wants to help. I'm not saying she's bad, Raj raised his hands in surrender. But you've known her for 3 months, and now she's messing with your business. Just keep your eyes open, okay? Eric waved it off, but Raj's words stuck in his head. Alexa had indeed begun to get more involved in Yield Pulse. Last week, she'd suggested a new smart contract developer, Lena, a friend from her New York fund. Lena was good, her code was clean, and her ideas for optimizing gas fees were impressive. But Eric noticed that she consulted Alexa often, even on small things that didn't require her input. It was a small thing, but it added up to other small things. The new contacts Alexa accidentally recommended, the meetings she insisted Eric attend, and her constant questions about Yield Pulse's financial health. A month after David Klein arrived, Eric noticed another change. Alexa suggested moving some of his personal crypto assets into a joint wallet. For convenience, she said. They were sitting at dinner in their loft, in front of plates of pasta carbonara that she had prepared with astonishing skill. It just makes sense, she explained, pouring him more wine. We're married, Eric. If we want to invest together, plan for the future, then a joint wallet would make everything easier. We could, for example, invest in the new pool on Yield Pulse together. Show that we believe in your project. Eric twirled the glass in his hand, looking at the ruby liquid. I don't mind, but my assets are mostly in cold storage, and I'm used to keeping everything separate. Security, you know. Oh, I understand, she smiled, but there was a slight edge to her voice. But think about it. We could diversify your holdings. I know a couple of promising tokens that could take off. And frankly, keeping everything in cold storage is a little paranoid, don't you think? Eric laughed, but inside he felt a chill. Paranoia is what saved me in 2018 when the stock markets were falling one after another. Then I'd be more careful. She leaned closer, her hand brushing his. But you trust me, right? I'm not some hacker who's going to steal your bitcoins. He looked into her eyes, dark and warm, and nodded. Of course I do. Just give me time to think. She nodded, but her smile was a little less bright than usual. No pressure, Eric. It's just an idea. The following week, Eric agreed to move a small portion of his assets, some ETH and some Yield Pulse tokens, to a joint wallet. Alexa helped set up multisig, explaining that it would add security. Now we both need to sign transactions, she said, showing him the interface. Like a real blockchain marriage. He smiled, but the process left him with a strange aftertaste. The wallet had been set up through a platform Alexa had recommended, and while everything seemed transparent, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing control. When he mentioned this to Raj, he frowned. A shared wallet? Dude, are you serious? Do you know how easy it is to frame someone with multisig if you don't check every line of code? She's my wife, Raj, Eric snapped. Do you really think she's trying to cheat me? I'm not saying she's cheating, Raj lowered his voice, looking around as if someone might be listening. But have you noticed that all the new people on our team are people she knows? David, Lena, that guy who came in last week, what's his name? Marcus, they're all connected to her. And now your assets are partially under her control. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Eric wanted to argue, but the words caught in his throat. He remembered Marcus, the new financial analyst Alexa had recommended, pushing for an investment in a token Eric knew next to nothing about. He remembered David Klein suggesting that they restructure some of YieldPulse's assets to be more tax efficient, even though their current structure was working just fine. And he remembered the look in Alexa's eyes as she closed her laptop when he walked into the room. I'll talk to her, he said finally, but his voice sounded uncertain. That night, Eric waited for Alexa to return from yet another foundation meeting. She walked in smiling as always, but he noticed a hint of weariness in her eyes. Long day? He asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. Oh, you have no idea, she said, kicking off her shoes and plopping down on the couch next to him. Clients are getting more and more demanding, but I've set up a meeting with a couple of investors who might be useful for YieldPulse. Want to set up dinner? Eric looked at her, trying to find answers in her face. Alexa, tell me honestly, why are you so involved in YieldPulse's affairs? Consultants, wallets, investors, these are all your people. What's going on? She froze, her smile slowly fading. What are you talking about, Eric? I'm just trying to help. You know how much I believe in your project. I know, he sighed, rubbing his temples. But sometimes it feels like I don't know, like you're trying to take control of everything. My assets, my business. I don't want to think you're hiding anything, but you think, her voice grew colder, but she didn't look away. Eric, I'm your wife. I've put as much into this as you have, if not more. I'm bringing in people who can make YieldPulse stronger because I believe in us. If you don't trust me, that's your problem, not mine. He felt his heart clench. Her words sounded sincere, but there was a sharpness to them that cut him. I trust you, he said, though that wasn't entirely true. Let's be transparent, okay? If you want to change anything in the business, talk to me and Raj. Don't do it behind my back. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, transparency, I can do that, but you have to be open too, Eric. It works both ways. He nodded, but as she went to take a shower, he sat there, staring at his laptop. The screen displayed the balance of their joint wallet, and he noticed a small transaction, a few F's sent to an address he didn't recognize. It could have been a routine transaction, part of her investment, as she'd said. But his instincts, honed by years in the crypto world, screamed that something was wrong. Check the transaction, a voice inside him whispered. And for the first time in their marriage, Eric decided to listen to it, not his heart. San Francisco was bathed in the golden light of late October, but to Eric Tanner, the city felt colder than usual. His Soma loft, once a place of comfort and ambition, now felt like a labyrinth, where every corner hid shadows of doubt. It had been 4 months since he and Alexa had married, and though YieldPulse was thriving and their life together looked picture perfect on Instagram pictures of early morning runs through Kringle Park, dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, Eric felt like he was losing control. Not just of his business, but of what he thought was his love. Alexa was omnipresent. She hadn't just entered his life, she had reshaped it. Her ideas for YieldPulse, the people she knew who now surrounded Eric, lawyer David Klein, developer Lena, financial analyst Marcus, all seemed part of a plan he didn't fully understand. The joint wallet he'd moved some of his crypto into was her idea, and though she insisted it was for their future, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that he was being lured into a trap. Raj, his best friend, kept warning him, "Dude, she knows too much, and she moves your pieces too fast." But Eric brushed it off, telling himself it was paranoia. Love, he told himself, requires trust. But trust began to crumble at the seams that evening when everything collapsed. Eric was sitting in the downtown Yield Pulse office, late into the night, reviewing a report on a new liquidity pool. Alexa had left for another fund meeting in Los Angeles, leaving him alone. He was used to her absences. She always returned with new ideas, contacts, or deals that she said would change the game. But something was different this time. Her messages were coming less frequently, and there was a coolness to them he hadn't noticed before. When he wrote to her, "How are things in Leh?" she replied 3 hours later, "Everything is okay. We are busy. I will call tomorrow." It wasn't like her. She usually called, even if she was deep in negotiations. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. It was midnight, the office empty except for the hum of the servers. His gaze fell on his phone, lying on the desk. He and Alexa shared a cloud storage account for work files, an idea she'd suggested to make syncing easier. Eric rarely checked it, trusting her to manage their shared projects. But on impulse, he opened the app. The cloud was organized immaculately. Folders with labels like yield pulse underscore strategy, investments, personal underscore documents. But one folder, simply labeled R, caught his eye. It was password protected, something he hadn't noticed before. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Why would Alexa password protect a folder in their shared storage? He tried her regular password, the one she used for their joint wallet. It didn't work. Then he entered their wedding date. Access granted. There were several files inside, PDFs, screenshots of conversations, even a couple of videos. Eric clicked on the first PDF. It was a contract signed by Alexa and someone called Thomas Reed. The name sounded vaguely familiar. He opened the file and his heart sank. It was a consulting agreement, not with her fund, but with a competing DeFi project that was trying to enter the same market as Yield Pulse. The amount in the contract, $500,000, made him freeze. Why hadn't she mentioned this? He opened the next file, a screenshot of a Signal conversation. The messages were between Alexa and David Klein, their lawyer. Eric expected a businesslike tone, a discussion of regulations or taxes. Instead, he saw, "Alexa, everything is under control." He signed the multisig without any questions. David, "Great. When do we start translating?" Alexa, "Soon. Give me a couple of weeks to build trust." David, "Are you sure he won't suspect? He's not stupid." Alexa, "He's in love. It makes him blind." Eric felt the blood drain from his face. He reread the messages, hoping it was a mistake that he had misunderstood. But the words were there in black and white. His fingers shook as he opened the next file, a video. He clicked play, and Alexa appeared on the screen, sitting in a hotel room. She was laughing, her hair down, and next to her, on the bed, sat a man. Not David, someone else, with dark hair and a tattoo on his forearm. They were drinking champagne, and her hand was resting on his knee. "Are you sure he won't notice?" the man asked, his voice low and slightly accented. "Eric, he's too busy with his startup," Alexa replied, her laugh like a knife in Eric's chest. "Plus, he trusts me. It's almost sweet." Eric paused the video. His breathing was ragged, his ears were ringing. He opened another video, unable to stop. This time, Alexa was with David Klein at a restaurant, where they were sitting too close for a business meeting. She leaned toward him, whispering something, and he laughed, his hand sliding around her waist. Eric slammed his laptop shut. The room spun, and he grabbed the edge of the desk to steady himself. His mind refused to accept what he was seeing. Alexa, his wife, the woman he considered his other half, wasn't just cheating on him, she was doing it openly, with multiple men, including the lawyer who helped with their joint wallet. And worse, she was using his trust to manipulate his business, his assets, his life. He stayed up all night, sitting on the balcony with a bottle of whiskey he hadn't even opened. His mind swung between anger, pain, and cold determination. By morning, he had made a decision. He wouldn't make a scene. He wouldn't scream or break furniture. He would act the way he'd learned in the crypto world, methodically, strategically, with a cool head. In the morning, he called Raj. "I need your help," he said, his voice hoarse from a sleepless night, "and your hacker friend, the one who helped us with the audit." Raj, sensing the seriousness in his tone, didn't ask any more questions. "What's up, dude? Just come, and don't tell anyone." When Raj arrived, Eric showed him the files. Raj was silent as he scrolled through screenshots and watched clips of video, his expression growing darker. "Damn, Eric, I told you." "Don't," Eric snapped. "I don't want to hear 'I told you so.' I need to know what to do." Raj nodded, his eyes full of sympathy. "Okay, 1, we're checking the wallet. If she and David are planning something with your assets, we need to track every transaction. My boyfriend, Kevin, can dig deeper. 2, you need a lawyer. Not hers, yours. Someone who can sort out the prenup and protect your stake in Yield Pulse." Eric nodded, his jaw clenched. "What about her? Alexa?" Raj looked at him, his voice softening. "That's up to you, man. But if you want the truth, you're going to have to ask. Just not now. Protect yourself first." Over the next few days, Eric lived on autopilot. He smiled at Alexa when she came home, listened to her stories about her meetings, pretended everything was fine. But every night, after she fell asleep, he dug into the data. Kevin, Raj's hacker, had found transaction trails from their joint wallet that led to addresses linked to her foundation, and worse, to offshore accounts she'd never mentioned. The prenuptial agreement he'd signed so trustingly turned out to be cleverly crafted. In the event of a divorce, she could lay claim to a portion of his assets if she could prove she'd made a substantial contribution to Yield Pulse. And with her people on board, David, Lena, Marcus, it wouldn't be hard. Eric hired a lawyer recommended by Raj, a woman named Sarah Levin who specialized in crypto startups. She studied the contract and shook her head. "It's not airtight, but she clearly knew what she was doing," Sarah said, her tone businesslike but sympathetic. "We can challenge this, especially if we can prove she acted in bad faith. But you need evidence, more than you have." "I will find them," Eric replied, his voice cold as steel. The climax came a week later at a dinner Alexa hosted for potential investors in their loft. The guests were her people: David Klein, Lena, Marcus, and a few others Eric was meeting for the first time. The atmosphere was tense, despite the wine and fancy hors d'oeuvres. Eric watched Alexa, the way she laughed, touched David's shoulder, exchanged glances with Marcus. He felt like a stranger in his own home. As the guests gathered around the table, Eric stood up, holding a glass of wine. "I want to make a toast," he began, his voice even but with a hidden strength. "To trust, to the people who come into our lives and make them better, or maybe to those who think they can deceive us." Silence fell over the room. Alexa looked at him, her smile frozen. "Eric, what are you?" "I know, Alexa," he interrupted, his eyes boring into hers. "I know about you and David, about you and Thomas Reed, about your deals behind my back, about the transactions from our wallet, everything." Her face went pale, but she quickly pulled herself together. "Eric, you're delirious. This is no place for—" "No, this is the perfect place," he said, taking out his phone and turning on the projector he'd set up earlier. The conversation appeared on the wall, her messages with David, screenshots of transactions, a clip of her laughing with Thomas at the hotel. The guests froze, some looking away, others staring at Alexa. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" His voice shook, not from weakness, but from anger. "You used me, my business, my money, my love. But I'm not blind, Alexa. Not anymore." David coughed, trying to intervene. Eric, this is a misunderstanding. We can explain. Explain? Eric turned to him, his eyes blazing. Explain how you helped my wife steal from me, or how you slept with her while I signed your contracts. The room erupted in whispers. Alexa stood up, her face a mask of rage and fear. Eric, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. None of this is true. You're paranoid. Paranoid, he laughed, but it was bitter. I found your files, Alexa. Your plans. You didn't even try to hide them. You thought I was too in love to check. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words didn't come. Instead, she grabbed her bag and headed for the door. You're making a mistake, Eric. You'll regret it. The only mistake was that I trusted you, he said, his voice as cold as the blockchain he loved so much. As the door slammed behind her, the guests began to leave, avoiding his gaze. Raj, who had been standing quietly in the corner, came over and put a hand on his shoulder. You did it, man. It was tough, but you did it. Eric nodded, but his heart was empty. He had won this battle, but he had lost something more, his belief that love could be true. He looked at the projector where her messages still glowed, and knew that another war awaited him now to protect his business, his assets, and his soul. San Francisco was gray and cold that November evening when Eric Tanner sat in his loft, looking out over the bay, the lights of the Bay Bridge twinkling like stars in a murky sky. His world, once seemingly invincible yield pulse, was booming. The Coinbase deal was almost done, was now falling apart. The revelation that Alexa, his wife, had cheated on him was just the beginning. After that dinner, where he'd publicly posted her text messages and evidence of her betrayal, she'd disappeared from his life. Or so he thought. 2 weeks later, she called, her voice cold and businesslike. We need to meet, Eric. It's important. He agreed, even though every instinct in his body screamed at him that it was a trap. But Eric wasn't one to hide. He'd built his career in the cryptocurrency world, where every day was a game of survival, and if Alexa wanted war, he was ready. They agreed to meet in a neutral location, a small cafe in North Beach, where the tables were spaced far enough apart that no one could overhear. When he walked in, Alexa was already there, sitting by the window overlooking Columbus Avenue. She looked as perfect as ever, with her dark hair pulled back into a low bun and a black sweater that accentuated her confident posture. But her eyes, once warm and inviting, were now as cold as a steel wallet. There was a thin folder on the table in front of her, and Eric knew immediately that this wasn't just a conversation about divorce. You look tired, Eric, she said, not getting up as he sat down opposite her. Too many nights coding, or have I worn you out? He ignored her tone, ordering an espresso from the waiter. What do you want, Alexa? You left after that dinner. I thought you'd said everything. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I want a divorce. Clean, quick, no drama. But there's a problem, Eric. You've decided to play dirty and expose me to everyone, so I'm forced to defend myself. Eric felt his stomach clench. Defend yourself? You're the one who cheated on me. You tried to manipulate my business. If anyone's playing dirty, it's you. She leaned closer, her voice lower. Oh, Eric, you think you're so smart, digging up my messages, but you've forgotten who you're dealing with. I can dig too, and I have something on you. She opened the folder and pushed it toward him. Eric took it, his fingers shaking slightly. Inside were printouts of conversations, presumably his on a messaging app he never used. The messages were with an unknown contact, labeled Partner X. They discussed transferring large sums of money through Yield Pulse, with references to regulation circumvention and anonymous wallets. There were even screenshots of transactions where his wallet address was allegedly sending ETH to offshore accounts. Eric felt the blood drain from his face. It's fake, he said, his voice firm but seething inside. I never wrote it, and you know I'm not a money launderer. Alexa shrugged, her face unreadable. Maybe so, but you know how it works, Eric. Regulators don't want the truth. They want headlines. If I send this to the SEC or, say, the IRS, they'll start digging. And even if you're clean, and I'm sure you are, her lips curled into a slight smile, an investigation will destroy Yield Pulse. Investors will flee, Coinbase will pull the deal, and your reputation will turn to dust. Eric clenched his fists under the table. Are you threatening me? After everything you've done? I'm defending myself, she said, leaning back and crossing her arms. You humiliated me in front of everyone. You think I'm just going to walk away with my tail between my legs. I want half of your shares in Yield Pulse, and I want you to sign a no-questions-asked divorce agreement. Otherwise, these documents are going to end up in the hands of people who are going to make your life very difficult. He looked at her, trying to find in her face the woman he loved, but he saw only calculation. Do you really think I'm just going to give up? After everything I've built? You can fight it, she shrugged. But it's going to be expensive. And not just in money. Think about it, Eric. Your parents are in Sacramento, your team, your users. Do you want them to know you're under investigation? Eric felt anger mingle with desperation. He had built Yield Pulse from scratch, invested everything into it, his savings, his dreams, his sleepless nights. And now this woman he had trusted with his heart was holding his life hostage. I'm not signing anything until I talk to a lawyer, he finally said, his voice cold as steel. Smart move, Alexa smiled, but there was no joy in her eyes. But don't wait too long. I don't have much patience. Eric returned to the loft, his mind in chaos. He called Raj, who arrived half an hour later, his face dark as a thundercloud. Is she seriously blackmailing you? Raj paced the room, clenching his fists. This is some fucking TV show, dude. Money laundering. She really thinks this is going to work. She doesn't think I'm guilty. Eric sat on the couch, looking at the folder of documents he'd picked up from the cafe. She knows it's fake, but she's right. If this gets to the regulators, they'll start digging. And even if I prove my innocence, it'll kill Yield Pulse. Raj paused, looking at him. You're not going to give in to her, are you? We can fight. We have Kevin. He can track down where these fake documents came from. And Sarah, your lawyer, she's already working on a prenuptial agreement. Eric nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He remembered signing that contract, trusting Alexa, believing she was his partner in everything. Now he saw she was playing the long game, and he was a pawn. I won't give up, he said quietly, but I need to know how deep she's gone. If she faked these messages, that means she has access to something else. Maybe my wallets, maybe the Yield Pulse servers. Raj whistled. You think she hacked you? That's next level, dude. I don't know. Eric stood up, his eyes full of determination. But I'm going to find out. The next few days were a flurry of work. Eric and Kevin, Raj's hacker, dove into analyzing the fake documents. Kevin quickly confirmed that the conversations had been generated using software that forged messaging app metadata. Someone did a good job, he said, sitting in the Yield Pulse office with 3 laptops in front of him. But it's not perfect. I found edits in the EXIF data of the screenshots. And the transactions, they're real, but the addresses aren't directly linked to you. She probably used a fake wallet to create the illusion. Can you prove it's fake? Eric asked, his voice tense. I can try, Kevin tapped his keyboard. But I need more time. And honestly, if she's willing to do that, she might be more dangerous than we thought. Meanwhile, Sarah Levin, Eric's lawyer, was working on another part of the problem. She'd pored over the evidence folder and found inconsistencies in the legal documents. These contracts she claims to have signed on your behalf are fake, she said during a video call. The signatures don't match yours, and some of the dates predate your meeting with her. But we need more. If she turns this over to regulators, we'll have to prove your innocence in court. Eric nodded, his mind racing. What about the prenuptial agreement? Any chance of getting it annulled? Yes, Sarah adjusted her glasses. If we can prove she acted in bad faith, like manipulating you for financial gain, the court could invalidate the contract, but it'll be a long process and expensive. Money is not the problem. Eric said, though he knew it was more than just money. It was his reputation, his business, his life. A week later, Eric received another message from Alexa. "You're stalling, Eric. That's a mistake. You have 48 hours to sign the agreement, or the paperwork goes to the SEC." Attached to the message was a new file, another fake correspondence in which he allegedly discussed gray schemes with David Klein. Eric called an emergency meeting with Raj, Kevin, and Sarah at the office. "She won't stop," he said, throwing his phone on the table. "She'll keep throwing out more evidence until I crack." "Then we'll strike first," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We'll sue her for slander and fraud. We've got enough to get us started. Her text messages with David, the videos, the evidence of forgery. It won't win the case right away, but it will make her back down." Raj nodded. "And I reached out to a couple of people at her fund. One of them seemed willing to talk. He said Alexa has been playing this game for a long time, manipulating partners, faking data to get stakes in startups." Eric looked at his friends, feeling a mixture of gratitude and weariness. "I don't want a war," he said quietly. "I just want my life back." "You're already at war, dude," Raj put his hand on his shoulder. "But we're with you, and we're going to win." Eric decided to meet Alexa again, but on his own terms. He chose a public place, a restaurant in the city center, where they could be seen but not overheard. When she walked in, he noticed that she seemed less confident than before. Her eyes were darting, her fingers fiddling nervously with the strap of her bag. "You didn't sign," she said, sitting down. "That was stupid." "Stupid?" Eric leaned closer, his voice quiet but full of power. "It was stupid to think you could blackmail me and get away with it. I know your evidence is fake. I have a lawyer already preparing a lawsuit, and I have people digging into your past. Do you really want to continue?" Her face went pale, but she didn't back down. "You're bluffing, Eric. You wouldn't dare. If you sue, I'll destroy you first." "Try it," he said, pushing a folder toward her, a copy of her own documents, but with Kevin's notes showing the forgery. "These are your messages, your transactions, your videos. And you know what? Courts love evidence, and I have more than you do." Alexa looked at the folder, her lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, she seemed lost. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want a divorce, without your conditions, and I want you out of my life and out of my business. If you try again, I won't stop until I destroy you." She was silent, her eyes searching for him, as if searching for weakness. But Eric was looking straight ahead, and there was none of the naivety she had once used in his gaze. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, but this isn't the end, Eric. This is the end for you," he said, standing up. "My lawyer will contact you." The cold San Francisco air hit him in the face as he walked out of the restaurant. But for the first time in weeks, Eric felt like he could breathe. He knew the fight wasn't over. Alexa wasn't one to give up easily, but he was ready. He'd built an empire in a world where everyone was out to destroy him, and he wasn't going to let one woman, even one he loved, take everything from him. San Francisco, shrouded in December fog, felt like a ghost town to Eric Tanner, where every light in the window hid someone's secret. His Soma loft, once a symbol of his success, was now a refuge where he spent his nights digging through the digital traces of a life destroyed by Alexa Rain. Her blackmail, fake evidence of money laundering through Yield Pulse was just the tip of the iceberg. After their last encounter at a restaurant, where he challenged her, Eric knew he couldn't just wait for her to make her next move. He had to find out the truth, the whole truth about who she was and what she wanted. And the deeper he dug, the clearer it became that Alexa was more than just a calculating trader. She was part of something much bigger. Eric sat at his desk, surrounded by 3 monitors with dozens of tabs open. Blockchain explorers, darknet forums, archived Reddit threads, and screenshots of conversations that Kevin, Raj's hacker, had pulled from her cloud. On one screen, the wallet linked to their joint multisig glowed, where he'd noticed suspicious transactions, small transfers of ETH to addresses that led to dodgy exchanges. On another, a list of names he'd found in her files: David Klein, Thomas Reed, Lena Marcus. Names he'd once dismissed as acquaintances now seemed like links in a chain he needed to break. "You look like something out of a thriller," Raj said, walking into the loft with 2 cups of blue bottle coffee. He set one down in front of Eric and sat down on the couch, looking at the chaos on the table. "When was the last time you got more than 4 hours of sleep?" "I don't remember." Eric sipped his coffee, his eyes glued to the screen. "But I'm close, Raj. I found something. Her fund, Rain Capital, isn't just an investment. It's tied to a bunch of wallets that were used to drain assets from other DeFi platforms." Raj frowned, leaning closer. "Are you serious? You think she didn't just trick you, but what? Part of some crypto mafia?" Eric turned to him, his eyes tired but determined. "I don't know how much of this is mafia, but it's definitely not a solo game. Remember Thomas Reed, the guy from her videos? I found him. He's not just her lover. He was the CEO of a Seattle startup that went down 2 years ago after a hack. All their tokens were gone, and the investors were left with nothing. And you know who their advisor was? Alexa." Raj whistled, leaning back. "Damn, this is serious. But how are you going to prove it? She won't leave any obvious traces." "She already left." Eric clicked on the keyboard, opening the transaction file. Kevin traced one of her wallets to an exchange in Hong Kong. From there, the money went to an address linked to an offshore company in the Cayman Islands. And that company? Its director is David Klein. Raj stared at the screen, his expression dark. "The same lawyer who helped with your wallet. Dude, that's not just a coincidence." "It's not a coincidence." Eric rubbed his temples, feeling his headache growing. "I started digging further. I found a forum on the darknet where they were discussing scam schemes in crypto. One of the users, under the nickname Shadowrain, bragged about how they milk startups. He described the scheme: a beautiful woman, a quick romance, marriage, joint assets, and then blackmail or theft. And you know what? This user's nickname is registered to the same email that Alexa used for her foundation." Raj shook his head, his voice thick with disbelief. "You're telling me your wife is part of some gang that's ripping off crypto moguls? That sounds like a fucking conspiracy podcast." "I thought so too." Eric opened another file, a screenshot of an old Reddit post from 2022. But this, a post from an anonymous user who claimed his startup was ruined after he married a crypto consultant. He described her as tall, dark hair, blockchain savvy, named Anna. But in the comments, someone wrote that her real name was Alexa Rain. And this guy, the victim, mentioned that his assets were transferred to the same offshore I found. Raj paused, digesting the information. "Okay, so let's say you're right. She's not just a scammer, she's part of a whole network. What then? You can't just go to the police and say, 'My wife is a crypto thief.' You have evidence, but it's all digital, and she's already threatening you with fake charges." Eric nodded, his jaw clenched. "I know. That's why I'm digging deeper. Kevin found another person who may have been her victim. His name is Nathan Weber, the former founder of an NFT platform in Miami. His startup collapsed in 2023 after his wife dumped their tokens. I contacted him via encrypted chat. He agreed to talk. The meeting with Nathan was arranged at a coffee shop in Oakland, away from the prying eyes of San Francisco. Eric chose a table in the corner, ordered a black coffee, and waited, nervously tapping his fingers on the table. Nathan walked in 10 minutes later, a thin man in his mid-30s, with tired eyes and a hint of gray at the temples. He looked like a man who had seen too much. "Are you Eric Tanner?" Nathan asked, sitting down across from her. His voice was quiet but firm. Eric nodded, pushing the coffee towards him. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. I need to know what happened to you." To her. Nathan looked at him, his gaze heavy. "You mean Anna? Or as she calls herself now, Alexa?" Eric felt his heart skip a beat. "You know her by another name." Nathan chuckled bitterly as he sipped his coffee. She was Anna Cross when I met her. Miami Conference 2022. Smart, beautiful, knew more about blockchain than half the speakers. We started dating, got married 3 months later, and 6 months later, my platform crashed because someone dumped our tokens on an exchange and then crashed the price. I lost everything, $12 million, investors' reputation. Eric swallowed, his voice hoarse. And you think it was her? I don't think, I know. Nathan pulled out his phone and showed a screenshot. It was a photo of Alexa or Anna on a yacht with another man, whom Eric recognized as Thomas Reed. I found this after the divorce. She was working with a team. They pick a target, a startup with a lot of assets, gain their trust, marry them, get access to wallets or tokens. Then they either blackmail them or just steal them. I wasn't the first, and it looks like you won't be the last. Eric felt anger mix with horror. Why didn't you go to the police? Nathan laughed, but it was empty. Because I had no proof. She does everything clean. All transactions are done through anonymous wallets. Documents are forged so that you can't find anything. And if you start digging, she throws out fake charges like you. Money laundering, tax evasion, anything to shut you up. Eric clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. But you haven't given up, have you? You're here, talking to me. Nathan looked him in the eye, his voice quieter. I gave up. I lost everything and walked away. But when you wrote, I thought, maybe if we banded together, we might have a chance. She won't stop, Eric. She and her team, they're like spiders, weaving a web until you're tangled. Back in the loft, Eric couldn't sit still. He paced the room as Raj and Kevin studied the new data Nathan had handed over. Old wallets linked to Alexa, names of other possible victims, even IP addresses Kevin had begun tracking. It's not just her and David, Kevin said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. I've found traces of 3 more people. One of them appears to be a hacker who's been faking communications and metadata. The other is a financier who's been laundering their money through offshore companies. Raj looked at Eric, his face serious. Dude, this isn't just a scam anymore. This is organized crime. We need to go to the FBI. Eric shook his head. The FBI. We don't have enough hard evidence. They'll dig, and Alexa will use her fake IDs to bring me down. We need more. We need to catch her red-handed. Kevin looked up from his laptop. I have an idea. She's still threatening you, right? We could set her up. Create a fake deal like a large transfer of Yield Pulse tokens to her wallet. If she takes the bait, we can track where the money goes and tie her to the offshore companies. Eric thought about it, his mind racing. It's risky. If she gets suspicious, she might strike first. Then we'll be careful, Raj said, his voice full of determination. We're with you, Eric. She thinks you're alone, but you have us. And Nathan, maybe even more victims if we find them. Eric nodded, feeling a spark of hope ignite within him. He wasn't alone. Alexa and her crew might be spiders, but he wasn't going to be a fly in their web. He was Eric Tanner, a kid from Sacramento who'd built a $1 million business from scratch. And if she wanted a war, he was going to give her a fight she didn't expect. Okay, he said, sitting down at his laptop. Let's do it. Set a trap. But first, I want to find another victim. If Nathan's right, there are more of them. And the more of us there are, the harder we'll hit. Raj smiled for the first time that evening. That's my guy. Let's go down the rabbit hole, man. Eric opened a new tab, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He knew this would be a long and dangerous journey, but he was ready. Alexa thought she had broken him, but she was wrong. He was just getting started. San Francisco in early December was swept by a chilly bay wind, but inside Eric Tanner's loft, the air was charged with tension. His desk had become a command center, 3 monitors littered with tabs containing blockchain explorers, encrypted chats, and legal documents, a coffee maker running at full capacity, and a notebook covered with names, wallet addresses, and plans. Eric was in the middle of a war he hadn't chosen, but he was now determined to win. Alexa Riani, his ex-wife, had turned out to be more than just a trader. She was part of a criminal ring swindling crypto entrepreneurs. Her blackmail fake accusations of money laundering through Yield Pulse was the last straw. Eric wasn't going to play by her rules anymore. He was fighting back, and this time it would be legal. His first step was simple but demanding: gather irrefutable evidence. He already knew that Alexa and her team, David Klein, Thomas Reed, and others, were systematically fleecing startups through marriages, manipulation, and forged documents. Nathan Weber, her previous victim, had confirmed this, but testimony alone was not enough. Eric needed a cast-iron case that would stand up to scrutiny in court. He started with what he knew best: blockchain. Eric sat in the Yield Pulse office with Kevin, a hacker Raj had brought onto the team. Kevin, a skinny guy with a QR code tattooed on his wrist, was a genius at tracking transactions. His laptop was open to Etherscan, where he was analyzing the chain of transactions from their joint multisig wallet created by Alexa. "There it is," Kevin said, pointing to the screen where the wallet address glowed. "This wallet received 5 ETH from your multisig 3 weeks ago. From there, the money went to an exchange in Singapore and then to an offshore address. I checked. It's linked to a company in the Cayman Islands where David Klein is listed as a director." Eric leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "Can you prove this is her transaction? She'll say I sent it." Kevin grinned, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "Already proved it. I found her signature in the multisig. She used her private key to approve the transfer. And the transaction metadata? It leads to an IP address in New York, where she was at the time. It's irrefutable, dude." Eric nodded, feeling a spark of hope ignite within him. "Okay, track everything you can. I want to know every wallet, every exchange, every company it's associated with." "It'll take time," Kevin warned. "She's smart. They use mixers to cover their tracks." "We have time," Eric replied, even though he knew that wasn't entirely true. Alexa had given him 48 hours to sign the divorce agreement or her fake documents would go to the SEC. But he wasn't about to give up. The next step was to bring in a professional. Raj recommended a private investigator, Elaine Marshall, a woman with a bulldog reputation who specialized in financial crime. Eric met her in a nondescript office in the Marina District, where the walls were covered with certificates, and on the desk sat an old coffee maker that smelled of burnt beans. Elaine, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and a piercing gaze, listened to his story without interrupting. When he finished showing her a folder of evidence, emails, transactions, videos, she leaned back in her chair and tapped her pen on the table. "This is serious, Mr. Tanner," she said, her voice raspy, like someone who smoked too much in the 90s. "You're saying your wife is part of an organized group that's running a crypto scam. This isn't just a scam. This is potentially an FBI case. But you're going to need some hard evidence to get them to listen to you." "I'm working on it," Eric replied, handing her the USB with Kevin's data. "I have the transactions, the correspondence, and the testimony of the other victim. But I need more. I want to know who else is on her team and find other victims." Elaine nodded, her eyes lighting up. "Okay, I'll start with David Klein and Thomas Reed. I'll check their finances, their connections, their travels. If they're working together, I'll find a lead. But it's going to be expensive. Are you ready?" "Money's not the issue," Eric said, though he knew it wasn't just about money. It was his reputation, his business, his life. "And one more thing. I want you to check out her fund, Rain Capital. I think it's their main front." "Got it," Elaine wrote on her pad. "But be careful. If she finds out you're digging, she might strike first. People like her don't like being cornered." Eric nodded, feeling a chill in his chest. "I know. That's why I'm acting quietly." In parallel, Eric began looking for other victims. Nathan Weber, the founder of a failed NFT startup, was his first contact, but he was sure there were others. He created an anonymous account on a darknet forum where he had once found references to Alex under the nickname Shadowrain. Under the pseudonym CryptoHost, he wrote a post, looking for those who have suffered from crypto scams. Female consultant, marriage, asset theft. Share stories, confidential. The responses started pouring in a few days later. The first was from someone named Broken Chain, who claimed to have lost $8 million after marrying a woman named Caitlin, who looked suspiciously like Alexa. He described the same pattern: a quickie, a prenuptial agreement, access to wallets, and then the assets disappearing. Another user, Moonhodler, described a partner who consulted his startup before the company's tokens were dumped via a mixer. Eric corresponded with them via encrypted chats, gathering details that matched his story. Fake documents, blackmail, offshore accounts. "This is her," he told Raj, showing him the printouts. They were sitting in the Yield Pulse office, surrounded by empty pizza boxes. "This isn't just Alexa. This is a network. They target like predators and follow a pattern." Raj shook his head, his eyes wide with worry. "Dude, this isn't just you scamming me anymore. This is like a fucking crypto cartel. Are you sure you want to get involved with this? They might be more dangerous than you think." "I'm already in," Eric replied, his voice firm. "If I retreat, she'll destroy me. And not just me, anyone they come across next." A week later, Elaine sent the first report. She was sitting across from Eric in the same office, her face serious. "You were right about Rain Capital," she said, opening a folder. "It's a shell. The fund is registered in the Caymans, but their transactions are routed through dozens of shell companies. I found links to 3 other startups that collapsed in the last 5 years. All of them worked with advisors connected to Alexa or David Klein." Eric flipped through her report, his heart pounding. There were names, dates, amounts, and photos. One showed Alexa standing next to Thomas Reed at a conference in Dubai. Another showed David Klein signing documents in an office in the Caymans. "Is that good enough for the FBI?" he asked. "Almost," Elaine replied. "But we need more. If we catch her red-handed trying to transfer your assets, for example, it'll be a sure thing." Eric nodded, remembering Kevin's plan. "We're already working on it. Kevin's setting up a fake deal. We'll throw her a big transfer of Yield Pulse tokens and see where she sends them." Elaine raised an eyebrow. "Risky, but clever. If she takes the bait, I can use it to request a warrant for her emails and bank accounts." The fake deal was ready in 3 days. Kevin created a fake liquidity pool on Yield Pulse, supposedly with $10 million in assets. Eric accidentally mentioned it to Alexa when she called to remind him of her ultimatum. "You still haven't signed the agreement." Her voice on the phone was cold, but there was a hint of nervousness in it. "My patience is wearing thin, Eric." "I'm thinking about it," he said, trying to sound unsure. "But I'm busy right now. We're launching a new pool on Yield Pulse, a big one. If it takes off, I might sign your papers." She paused, and he could almost hear her mind working. "Which pool?" she asked finally, her tone too casual. "Just a new project. 10 million staked. I can show you the numbers if you want." He paused, as if hesitant. "But you're probably not interested." "Show me," she said quickly. "I'm still your wife, Eric. I have a right to know." He smiled, knowing she'd taken the bait. "Okay, come to the office tomorrow. I'll show you." The next day, Alexa walked into the Yield Pulse office, her face a mask of professionalism. Eric showed her the fake dashboard Kevin had created, displaying the pool's assets. She asked questions, her eyes darting around the screen, and he could see her making mental notes. "That's impressive," she said, her voice even but greedy. "Will you give me access to the wallet? For analysis." "Not now," Eric replied, looking into her eyes. "But I'll think about it." That same night, Kevin reported that she attempted to initiate a transfer from a multisig wallet using her key. Kevin intercepted the transaction, redirecting it to an address he controlled, and tracked where she wanted to send the tokens to an exchange associated with her offshore company. "We got her," Kevin said, his face alight with excitement. "This is proof, Eric. She tried to steal 10 million. We can give this to Elaine. Eric nodded, but his heart was heavy. He had won the battle, but the war was far from over. He contacted Elaine with the data, and she immediately began preparing documents for the FBI. At the same time, Eric sent messages to the other victims, Nathan, and two others he had found through the forum, offering to join forces to file a class action lawsuit. "We're going on the white side," he told Raj as they sat in the office, looking out over the city, bathed in evening lights. "No dirty games. We'll crush her legally." Raj raised his coffee in a toast. "Here's to you, man. You're turning this nightmare into a victory." Eric smiled, but his mind was elsewhere. He knew Alexa wouldn't go down without a fight, but now he had allies, evidence, and a plan. He was ready to go all the way down the rabbit hole and bring her out into the light. San Francisco in mid-December was shrouded in a cold fog that clung to the skyscrapers and bridges, as if trying to hide them from the world. Eric Tanner, sitting in his Soma loft, felt the same way, as if his life had been shrouded in a haze, and he had to fight his way into the light. His war with Alexa Rain, his ex-wife, had become a chess game where every move could be his last. She had threatened to destroy him with false money laundering charges, but he had uncovered her true identity. Alexa was part of a criminal ring specializing in swindling crypto entrepreneurs. Now, with the help of private investigator Elaine Marshall, hacker Kevin, and his friend Raj, Eric was plotting the final blow, a trap that would not only expose her, but also hand her over to the law. Eric knew that simply collecting evidence wasn't enough. Alexa and her team, David Klein, Thomas Reed, and others, were too clever to leave any obvious traces. Their scheme had been going on for years: quick affairs, marriages, access to assets, and then blackmail or theft. But Eric wasn't just a victim. He was a developer, a man who understood blockchain better than anyone around her, and he was going to use it against her. The plan was hatched over coffee in the Yield Pulse office, where Eric, Raj, and Kevin sat until 3 a.m., surrounded by computer screens and empty energy drink cans. Kevin, rubbing his eyes, pitched an idea. "We already know she fell for the fake liquidity pool. Let's take it a step further by faking a large transfer of your assets to a new wallet. We'll set up a smart contract that will detect her attempted theft and send the data straight to the SEC and FBI." Eric leaned closer, his eyes lighting up. "How will that work? She's not stupid. She'll notice if something's wrong." Kevin grinned, his fingers already flying across the keyboard. "We'll make it as realistic as possible. We'll create a new wallet, transfer Yield Pulse tokens into it, and some F enough that she won't be able to resist. But the wallet will be under our control, with a trap in the smart contract. As soon as she or her people try to withdraw the funds, the contract will trigger. It will block access and send a report with her address, signature, and transaction metadata to a pre-configured server. From there, the data will go to Elaine, who will hand it over to the authorities." Raj whistled, leaning back in his chair. "Dude, this is like a digital ambush. But are you sure this is legal? We don't want to incriminate ourselves." Eric nodded, his voice firm. "I already spoke to Sarah, my lawyer. She said that if we record an attempted theft and turn it over to the authorities, we're within the law. It's like putting an alarm on your house. If someone breaks in, it's their fault." Kevin raised his hand in surrender. "Okay, boss. I'll start writing the contract, but we'll need to test it to make sure there are no bugs. If she notices a catch, we're screwed." "Test as much as you need," Eric said, looking at the screen where their multisig wallet data glowed. "I want it to be perfect." It took a week to prepare. Kevin wrote a smart contract that looked like a standard wallet for storing assets, but contained a hidden feature. If an unauthorized withdrawal was attempted, it would activate a mechanism that recorded the sender's address, the transaction signature, and the IP from which it was initiated. The data was automatically sent to a secure server that Kevin had set up on Oz, and from there encrypted to Elaine Marshall. Elaine, in turn, had already contacted an FBI agent specializing in financial crimes and warned that she would soon have evidence of a major fraud. Meanwhile, Eric had set up a decoy. He created a new wallet publicly linked to YieldPulse and transferred $500,000 in tokens and 50 ETH into it, an amount large enough to attract attention, but not so large as to arouse suspicion. To make things more believable, he accidentally mentioned the wallet in a conversation with Alexa sent via their shared signal. I transferred some of the assets to a new wallet, he wrote, adding a note of weariness to play on her greed. If you want half, as you demand, let's discuss. But I will not sign your papers until I see that you are playing fair. She replied an hour later, a new wallet. Smart, Eric. But you know I won't back down. Send me the address, I'll check. He smiled as he sent her the public address of the wallet. The trap was set. Eric waited in the office with Kevin and Raj, their eyes glued to a monitor displaying real-time blockchain data. Elaine was on Zoom, her face on the screen tense but focused. If she bites, we'll get everything we need, she said, holding up her phone, ready to connect with an FBI agent. 2 hours later, Kevin jumped up in his chair. Yes, she tried to initiate a transfer. Look, her signature just appeared in the multisig. Eric leaned toward the screen, his heart pounding. A transaction had appeared on Etherscan, an attempt to withdraw 20 ETH to an address linked to one of the offshore companies Elaine had already tracked. But the contract had worked flawlessly. Instead of withdrawing the funds, it had locked the wallet and sent a report to the server. Kevin opened the log. All the data was there, the address, the signature, the IP, even the timestamp. It's her, Kevin said, his voice shaking with excitement. IP from New York matches her last trip, and the recipient's address, straight to her offshore. Elaine nodded on the screen. Great. I'm sending this to the agent right now. Eric, are you ready for the next step? Eric nodded, though his throat was dry. Yes, it's time to end this. The next day, Elaine turned over the data to the FBI and the SEC, along with a full report. Transactions, emails, statements from Nathan Weber, and another victim Eric had found on the dark web. An FBI agent, a man named James Carter, contacted Eric personally. His voice on the phone was businesslike, but he sounded genuinely interested. Mr. Tanner, we have enough to begin an investigation, Carter said. Your evidence, especially this latest transaction, gives us grounds for a warrant. We'll start with Rhine Capital and David Klein. But I must warn you, these cases can drag on for months, if not years. I understand, Eric replied, his voice firm. But I want them to answer everything, not just for me, but for others too. Carter paused, as if assessing his resolve. You did a good job putting this together. Not many victims make it this far. But be careful. People like your wife don't like to lose. Eric nodded, even though Carter couldn't see him. I know. That's why I'm not stopping. Meanwhile, Eric continued to search for more victims. He contacted Broken Chain, a dark web user who turned out to be a former developer from London named Oliver Hayes. Oliver told the same story, a quick fling with a woman calling herself Caitlin, marriage, and then the disappearance of £3 million in assets. He agreed to testify if his anonymity was preserved. Another victim, Moon Hodler, turned out to be a woman named Sophia from Singapore, who lost control of her startup after her advisor leaked tokens. Sophia was willing to cooperate, but feared for her safety. Eric set up an encrypted video conference with Nathan, Oliver, and Sophia to coordinate their efforts. We're stronger together, he said, his voice thick with conviction. If we pool our evidence, the FBI can't ignore us. Alexa and her team think we're broken, but they're wrong. Nathan, his face tired but determined on the screen, nodded. I'm in. I lost everything, but I don't want her to do this to anyone else. Sophia, her voice shaking, added, I was afraid to speak, but you're right. We have to stop her. Oliver, with his British accent, was more reserved. I'll help, but I need protection. These people, they're not just thieves. They have connections. Eric wrote it all down, passing the data to Elaine, who added it to the FBI file. He felt the net tightening around Alexa, but he knew she was still dangerous. She could strike at any moment with more blackmail, more forgeries, even physical threats. 3 days after the trap was activated, Eric received a message from Alexa. It was short. "You think you're smarter than me? It was a mistake, Eric. You'll regret it." He showed the message to Raj, who frowned. "She knows you set her up. That's bad." "Let her know," Eric replied, his voice cold. "She's not in control of the game anymore. We've turned everything over to the FBI. If she tries anything else, she'll only dig herself in deeper." But inside, he wasn't so sure. Alexa was like a shadow, always one step ahead, always with a new plan. He beefed up his loft security, changed the passwords on all his devices, and hired a security guard for the Yield Pulse office. Sarah, his lawyer, prepared a lawsuit against Alexa for fraud and defamation, as well as a request to annul their prenuptial agreement based on her bad faith. That evening, sitting in his loft, Eric looked out over the city, where lights flickered through the fog. His phone buzzed a call from Elaine. "Good news," she said, her voice full of energy. "The FBI just got a search warrant for the Rhine Capital offices in New York. They also froze several wallets tied to Alexa and Klein. Your trap worked, Eric. They're coming for her." Eric exhaled, feeling like he could breathe for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, Elaine. What next?" "Now we wait," she said. "The FBI will dig, and will continue to gather evidence. But I have to warn you, she might try to escape. People like her always have a plan B." Eric nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Let him try. I'll find her." He hung up and opened his laptop, checking the latest blockchain data. The trap had been sprung, but the game wasn't over. Alexa was hurt, but not defeated, and Eric knew he had to be ready for her next move. But he wasn't alone. Now he had Raj, Kevin, Elaine, Nathan, Oliver, Sophia, and the law on his side. He'd built Yield Pulse from nothing, and he wasn't going to let it ruin his life. This was his counter move, and he was playing to win. San Francisco, December 2025, was a city of contrasts. The cold fog off the bay mingled with the warmth of Christmas lights, and the skyscrapers of the city center shone like beacons of ambition. For Eric Tanner, the city was the scene of the most difficult battle of his life. His war with Alexa Rain, the woman who was once his wife, but was revealed to be part of a criminal network robbing crypto entrepreneurs, had reached a climax. The trap he had set with the help of hacker Kevin, private investigator Elaine Marshall, and his friend Raj had worked. A smart contract had detected Alexa's attempt to steal Yield Pulse tokens, transmitting the data to the FBI and SEC. Now the network was closing in around her, and Eric stood on the balcony of his Soma loft, looking out over the shimmering bay, feeling a mixture of relief and fatigue. He was close to freedom from her lies, from the fear she had sown in his life. But the victory wasn't complete. Alexa wasn't one to go down without a fight, and Eric knew the final steps would be the most dangerous. He'd gathered evidence, brought together the other victims of her schemes, Nathan Weber, Oliver Hayes, Sophia from Singapore, and turned it over to the law. Now he waited with bated breath while the FBI and SEC did their work. His loft, once the place where he and Alexa had dreamed together, was now a command center where every call, every email could be decisive. The morning of December 18th began with a phone call from Elaine Marshall. Her voice, usually husky and controlled, was shaking with excitement. "Eric, they got her," she said without preamble. "The FBI raided the Rhine Capital offices in New York last night. Alexa, David Klein, and another guy, Thomas Reed, were arrested. They also froze their offshore accounts in the Caymans." Eric froze, his hand gripping the phone so tightly his fingers turned white. "They're in jail?" "Still in pretrial detention," Elaine replied. "But the FBI has everything you handed over. Transactions, correspondence, smart contract data. They also found a server at Rain Capital's office where the forged documents were stored, including the ones she used to blackmail you. That's the end, Eric. You got her." He exhaled, feeling the weight that had been pressing on his chest for months begin to dissolve. But something inside still nagged at him. What about the others? She couldn't work alone. Elaine paused, her voice growing serious. They're digging. There are a few other people they're checking out: Lena, Marcus, maybe the hacker who's been tampering with her messages. But that'll take time. For now, the main thing is that Alexa and her closest accomplices are under lock and key. Eric nodded, even though she couldn't see him. Thank you, Elaine. I don't know how I would have managed without you. You could have done it, she replied with a slight grin. You're stubborn, Tanner. That's your best asset. After the call, Eric sat on the couch, looking out at the city. Raj, who arrived an hour later with a bottle of whiskey and 2 pizzas, found him in the same position. Dude, you look like you just won a war and forgot how to smile, he said, placing the boxes on the table. Eric smiled weakly, accepting his glass of whiskey. They got her, Raj. Alexa, Klein, Reed, the FBI. Raj whistled, raising his glass. That's worth a drink. You did the impossible, man. You blew up their network like a true crypto Rambo. Eric shook his head, his voice quiet. I don't feel like a winner. I lost half my assets fighting her, and my faith in people, I guess. Raj looked at him, his eyes full of sympathy. You'll get the money back, and the faith. It will come back when you start living again. But first, a toast to freedom. Eric raised his glass, and they clinked. The whiskey burned his throat, but for the first time in months, he felt a warmth that wasn't anger or fear. Alexa's arrest was just the beginning. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal battles. Sarah Levin, Eric's lawyer, filed a lawsuit to annul the prenup, citing Alexa's fraudulent conduct. The judge, after reviewing the evidence, emails, transactions, statements from Nathan, Oliver, and Sophia, agreed that the contract had been signed under duress and with intent to defraud. That freed Eric from her claim to his share of yield pulse, but did not return the money he had lost in the joint purse. Kevin, analyzing the blockchain, calculated the losses. About $2 million in ETH and yield pulse tokens went to offshore accounts associated with Alexa and her team. The FBI froze some of these funds, but it was almost impossible to get them back. The money went through mixers and anonymous exchanges. Eric, however, did not despair. Yield Pulse was still profitable, and the deal with Coinbase, despite delays due to the investigation, was in the final stages. He lost his fortune, but kept the company and, more importantly, his name. The SEC, having examined the false documents Alexa had threatened Eric with, quickly closed the case against him. Agent James Carter, who had led the investigation, called him in late December. Your evidence helped us uncover a network that operated not only in the States, but also in Europe and Asia, he said. We arrested 2 more people, a hacker from Prague and a financier from Singapore. That's thanks to you, Mr. Tanner. Eric, sitting in the Yield Pulse office, felt a little relieved. What about Alexa? Will she talk? Carter paused. She's trying to make a deal, offering to turn in the others in exchange for a lighter sentence. But with what we have, she'll still spend years behind bars. You've done a good job. Eric thanked him and hung up. He knew that Alexa, even in prison, would remain a threat. Her intelligence, her charisma, her ability to manipulate all of it made her dangerous. But he was no longer afraid. He had persevered. By early January 2026, Eric felt like he could finally breathe. The lawsuits were in full swing, but his name had been cleared. Yield Pulse was thriving, and he was starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. He decided to take a break and flew to Bali, where he had once spent his honeymoon with Alexa, but now wanted to rewrite that chapter of his life. He rented a villa in Ubud, surrounded by rice paddies and jungle, where the silence was broken only by the singing of birds and the distant hum of motorcycles. Sitting on the terrace with his laptop, Eric was working on a new project, a decentralized platform that would help protect crypto users from scammers. He called it SafeChain. The idea was born from his own experience. The blockchain was transparent, but vulnerable if you didn't know where to look for traps. SafeChain used smart contracts to verify transactions, track suspicious wallets, and create a registry of trusted addresses. The platform also included an educational module that taught beginners the basics of security, from storing private keys to recognizing phishing attacks. Eric wrote the first blog post he planned to publish on the SafeChain website. Why SafeChain? I have lost millions to fraud. Not because I was stupid, but because I trusted. Blockchain promises freedom, but without protection, it becomes a jungle. SafeChain is my answer. It is a platform that uses the transparency of blockchain to protect you from those who play dirty. We don't just create code, we build trust. He sent a draft to Raj, who responded within an hour. Dude, that's powerful. You turn your pain into something cool. Proud of you. Eric smiled as he watched the sun set over the rice paddies. He thought of Nathan, Oliver, and Sophia, who had agreed to be SafeChain ambassadors, sharing their stories to warn others. He thought of Yield Pulse, which had continued to grow despite all the trials. And he thought of Alex, whose face still sometimes appeared in his mind, but no longer with pain, but with a lesson. It was a warm evening in Bali, with a faint scent of jasmine in the air. Eric sat on the terrace of his villa, a laptop with SafeChain's open source code in front of him. He had just finished a video call with the team in San Francisco, Raj, Kevin, and a new developer they had hired to help them get the platform up and running. They were planning a beta test for February, and interest from the crypto community was already overwhelming. Eric opened a bottle of Bintang beer and took a sip, looking up at the stars that shone over the jungle. His phone vibrated a text from Elaine. The court has set a date for Alexa's trial. She's still trying to negotiate, but the prosecutor is tough. You did it, Eric. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood up, walked to the edge of the terrace, and looked out at the horizon, where the moon was reflected in the water. He remembered standing there with Alexa, believing their love was something eternal, like a transaction on a blockchain. Now he knew that love, like code, could be vulnerable. But he also knew that it could be protected with knowledge, caution, and self-belief. Eric returned to his laptop and began writing a letter to potential SafeChain investors. Dear colleagues, I'm Eric Tanner, the founder of Yield Pulse and a man who has been through hell to protect his name and his business. Today, I introduce you to SafeChain, a platform that will make the crypto world safer for all of us. We can't stop all scammers, but we can give people the tools to fight back. Join us, and let's build a future where trust is not a weakness, but a strength. He hit send and leaned back in his chair, feeling the last chains that bound him fall away. Alexa was in the past, behind bars, where she belonged. His name was clear, his business was thriving, and his heart, though scarred, was beating to the rhythm of hope again. Bali, with its quiet nights and endless skies, reminded him that life went on, and he was ready for a new start. Eric raised his beer, toasting the empty air, to freedom, and to those who fight for it. The stars above him shone brighter than ever. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.